Hello and welcome to the 6th episode of the Developers Den podcast, where two indie devs talk about everything that is going on in the games industry, as well as tips and tricks. I said tips and tricks. Tips and tricks on what to do and what not to do as an indie dev, based on our experience developing our game SunnySide. But hello, welcome. My name is Siavash, aka Rainy, and joining me is my co-host Sydney, aka Fem. And today, this one is an episode where we go over stuff in the topics about indie game development. And this one is a biz dev one specifically. This one is titled, as you might have seen below this video or Spotify podcast or wherever else you're listening to it, is How to Sell Your Indie Game. So, Sydney, how do we do that?
Put me on the spot. It's a big question. I mean,
one thing I will say, open with.
There's a million ways,
is that I have experiences that I gained through running a Kickstarter that I will share. Sydney has more experience because she's the biz dev for SunnySide and RainyGames in general, as well as the co-founder and owner. So when it comes to a lot of more legal and kind of official money-making avenues and I don't know, contracts and whatnot, Sydney is your man. So
I'm your man.
Or woman.
Well, let's go. Okay, so let's talk about, because there's different ways, right? There's different types of video games. So let's start small scale. Okay, let's say you are a solo developer. You made a cute little platformer, and now you want to sell it. Right?
Yep.
What do you do? What do you think you do, Rainy? What do you want to do to sell your cute little indie platformer?
Yeah, if I had a little platformer, I'll just put it on Steam myself. And if I didn't have the $100 for it, I will put it on itch. If it was completed, that is.
Yeah, it doesn't work like that.
Yeah. Now, why does it not work like that?
It doesn't work that way because you have to have a legal entity that can make money. So
I will open a big parenthesis here. Directly,
America.
Sydney's talking about United States.
The United States, yeah.
Probably most of this is going to work around Europe and west side of the world, but it might not work in certain countries. For instance, if you're in Iran, you can't even do it to begin with, so forget about game development.
The reason that we kind of go America specific is because a lot of these platforms that we talk about are American based. So they're going to have American laws. Yeah. So it is unfortunately very American centric.
So before I completely derailed us, before you can sell your game, you need to be a legal entity?
You have to, So within the United States, you cannot just go and sell stuff. You can under a certain amount, but most of these places, the itch, Steam, PlayStation, they're going to want basically a company to send the money to, right? And so what you need to do is you need to create a company. Now, the benefit is it's really easy. I suggest the exact opposite of what everybody else suggests. The general suggestion is you can just go to LegalZoom.com. You can make a, Rainy Incorporated, Rainy LLC. Oh, it's just LegalZoom.com. It's like a legal website. So, and most Americans know it because it's all over commercials and stuff. No. And it
allows you to sign legal documents digitally.
No, it's more like legal advice. So, if you want to make a company, or if you need like something to be notarized, or if you need like a lawyer to get involved with something, but you don't want to pay a lawyer to get involved with something, you can go to LegalZoom. A lot of places that recommend, just make an LLC, go to LegalZoom, it's cheap, you can whatever. I don't recommend that, honestly. I don't think that's the best avenue for anybody. It's not as cheap as people say it is, and they're not going to help you at all. They're not going to give you advice. You are just a cog in a machine. You are a number in a record book, and nobody at LegalZoom gives a crap about you as a person. I really do suggest finding an actual lawyer. There aren't a lot of video game lawyers in the United States. There's like 7. But find one You can Google it. You can ask me. I will give you my recommendation for my lawyer. But having an actual lawyer who can walk you through the process of like, here's the stuff that you have to do. And yeah, you're going to have to pay them, but it's probably going to actually be cheaper than LegalZoom. And there are like filing fees that you have to pay no matter what. And depending on what state you're in, there's different things that you have to do. But there's a lot of like things to navigate. And if you really just want to get the little sticker that says my business LLC, whatever, so that you can sell stuff, sure, that's fine. But if you want to make a go of actually having a business, I say do it right the first time instead of doing what I had to do, which is backtrack and have to like undo a bunch of stuff that I did very sloppily just to redo it later.
And so this is even like
that's the first step
talking about, and I don't want to get into it just yet because I'm sure you have a nice intro to going through different aspects of this. I don't want to ruin your flow, but that is not even considering copyright stuff. Obviously, if you have a game,
correct,
you'd want to copyright the name. You wouldn't want to copyright the entities and whatnot. Now, if you got music, suddenly that whole thing works differently. So there's so much that you want to protect, and and just make sure you do it right the first time. So I think the best, I guess, what am I trying to say? The best thing that is to just get a lawyer as soon as you can.
Get a lawyer, and you know. There's not really a realm where you can just make a game and put it up somewhere and it's free and you can make money. Like, that's not really a thing. You know, I think you can technically on Steam just like make it a part of your Steam account. I think you can, and it is $100 and it's whatever. But if you do that long enough, and if you do start making money, you can get into trouble very easily.
So tax and stuff.
Yeah, so it's not that you can't do it. It's just there's a lot of risks that you're gonna take that just aren't worth it. So it's worth it to take the time. I think in total for like getting everything made legally, I think it was maybe like $1,000, which it's a lot of money. It really is.
Especially for something that you don't know is even going to make that to begin with.
Exactly, yeah. So that's why I tell people, are you sure you want to do this? Like, are you sure? Because it's really easy to look at Steam and look at all the junk that's on Steam and be like, oh, well, anybody can do it. But it's really not like that. It does take a little bit of seriousness. Yeah. Or even on itch, you know. So let's say you want to sell stuff on itch, right? Which is not, it's more approachable than Steam. You've been on the back end of itch. I haven't.
Yeah.
I don't even know, like, is it really as easy as you just put your bank account in? Like,
I haven't
do you know how it works?
On itch. I do have a free,
but you've seen like the back
software.
end.
Yeah. It looks simpler than Steam. It looks less crowded than Steam. It looks like you can connect a Stripe account, which then everything is handled through Stripe, which then Stripe is the one that would handle all the taxing, filing.
Yeah, and I can't remember if Stripe. I don't think you have to be a business for Stripe. So maybe you could do this
Stripe is so much
business.
easier. I think from the time I remember working with Stripe, and I think as soon as you stepped in, I handed Stripe to you. But I think Stripe takes care of taxes for you, generates files for you.
Okay, so let me backtrack this again. So my like professional advice is get a lawyer, build a business, and do it right. If you don't have the ability to do that, you can go to Stripe, make an account, connect that to itch, and then that's the money taken care of. And then you'd be pulling income. Now, that is you as a private citizen making money off of something. Taxes are going to become a problem. Period. End of story. You're going to have to declare that stuff. What I suggest to everybody, whether you're doing it for a business, you're doing it personally, use a separate bank account. Yeah, so that's the one thing that I will say is if you are at a point where you want to sell anything that you've made, this, whether it's a video game or you're selling chocolate out of your house or you're selling bread at farmer's market, whatever you're doing, get a bank account that's separate from your bank account. It doesn't have to be a business account. Is it better if it is? Yes, but it doesn't have to be. But make a separate bank account that you can use so that your accounting and your bookkeeping is easier. Because if you get audited, and you can, and it does happen, they're gonna want you to go through every single purchase you've ever made and like justify everything. And if all of your business purchases are in one place, it's going to make your accounting easier. Yeah. So that's my first piece of advice.
You might be surprised that I have a bit of experience with this. So for a family member over here in the UK,
okay.
Yeah, they run a craft business.
Okay.
So they are a kind of self-employed, and they use their personal account for a lot of the purchases that were for their business. So thankfully, UK kind of tax system is so much easier to go through. There's way less that you have to declare, and if you miss something, they're not going to break your kneecaps. But
feels like that way sometimes.
But it was quite a bit of a trouble that we had to go through the Amazon purchases, we had to go through every bank purchases and figure out how much the business has made. We ended up figuring out that the business hadn't actually made any money, so they didn't even have to pay any tax. It was just all loss actually at the end of the day. Well, the business grew, I guess, but
but the thing is that
don't do it through the personal account.
Well, yeah, and because what did that cost you? Cost you time.
Yeah. We were there going through receipts and purchases and all that.
It's a huge hassle. So if there's anything that you want to do outside of just your regular personal daily finances, open another bank account. And honestly, open a savings account too. And the reason I say that is because you can take any of your profits and put them into the savings account, and then you're not running the business off the profits. And that's a whole other like thing. But yeah, make another bank account and funnel everything through it, and it's just going to be cleaner and easier for you. Do you have to get like QuickBooks or any kind of accounting software? Not really. Will it make your life a little easier? Yeah, maybe. Up until I like hired a professional accountant, I did all of my accounting on an Excel sheet. Like it's doable, but it's a pain in the ass. Straight up, it's a pain. So there's just a lot of stuff involved with like the business side of it. Like you said, once you make a certain amount of money in the US and the UK, you're going to have to start paying taxes on it.
Yeah.
And if it's a struggle for you to figure out like where all the money is, that's, I think, the biggest thing that trips people up the fastest is like, how much money do you put in? How much money do you take out? When can you start paying yourself? Like we could do a whole just 3 hours on just that. But what it comes down to is like, for anything, get your ducks in a row. Don't just, I can do it, and just go out and do it, because you're going to end up causing so many problems for yourself. It's not worth it. So get a bank account. So that's the smallest level, right? That's I want to sell a little platformer.
And
if you want to do it on Steam,
is that if you don't want to deal with this, I get it. I'm the person who doesn't want to deal with that. I just want to be the artist or the programmer. Get yourself a biz dev. So you can either hire someone, or even better, you can form a partnership with someone, and they can take care of your business. This is a lesson that if you watch GDC, you see so many devs say that get yourself a business person that just keeps the business running. Because as a game dev, you're going to have so much on you at all times.
It's the same thing that I tell chefs who want to start a restaurant.
Oh, God,
if you want to start a restaurant, you have to decide, are you going to run the restaurant or are you going to cook in the restaurant? Because you cannot do both. You can try, and you're probably going to fail, and you're going to dig yourself an early grave.
In Kitchen Nightmares.
Seriously, yeah. So are there success stories? Yes. Are there people who've been able to do it? Yes. But for every successful Eric Baroni out there, what you don't see is the people who are funding him, the people who are taking care of his finances. You don't see the accountant, you don't see the lawyer, you don't see the big team of people that are actually helping. There's a lot. Nobody does this by themselves. Like you can, but those people are not something that you should be aspiring to. So, okay, so let's say, so that's the small level. Let's say you want to put it on Steam. I think it's a similar thing. Again, I always suggest having a business. If you want to go the open a business route, you have to do all the things to get the business. Once you have the business, they're going to give you what's called an EIN. It's an identification number for your business, and that's for tax things. You need the EIN in order to open a bank account for the business. So if you want to open a business bank account, you have to have a business first. So then you have to go through all the incorporation and all that
Employer
stuff.
identification number.
Employer identification number, yeah. So
IRS.gov, which I can't open.
Yeah, that's an IRS. That's an American thing. Yeah. So that's something to be aware of. If you want to do something like
over here, by the way.
Okay, let's say you want to make a game for PlayStation, you can't even get a PlayStation dev kit if you don't have an EIN. So if you want to go that route, you have to have a business. You have to have an EIN. You have to have a whole bunch of other stuff. So again, are you sure you want to do this? And if you're going to do it right and make sure you're making all the right decisions ahead of time. So that's that level. So let's say you want to make a bigger game. Let's say you want to do like the Kickstarter route, which honestly, I don't recommend for literally anybody.
See, Kickstarter makes it very easy. Now, from my experience,
too easy.
To run a Kickstarter campaign, and this is information from 2020 when SunnySide's Kickstarter campaign was up. You don't need a business. You don't need a registered business. You don't need any of that.
Insane.
You need to have a project, and if you are an honest person and you're not trying to scam people, you need to have an actually working project to then take screenshots and videos from, and then convince people to then spend money on it. And then once you've done that, so obviously we're just going to be talking more about the money side of things. We have already in the previous episodes talked about ways to market your Kickstarter campaign, so I'm not going to go through that, but cross promotion is a good one. Just giveaways sometimes works. Advertisements work really well, especially on Facebook and YouTube. But that aside, once your Kickstarter campaign hopefully has reached its goal and is successful, you just need a bank account and then they send you the money, and that's as easy as that.
But
then you have a whole lot of people that are waiting for a product.
And like, can you do that? Yes. Are you going to be successful? Probably not. Because you have to not only put together enough stuff to show that you are trustworthy and to get people to, believe in you, give you money, and you have to market it, but you also have to think about the rewards you want to give away. And I see it a lot. People just kind of doing what everybody else does with rewards, and then like, oh, we'll figure that out later when we actually have the money. And then it's time to pay the piper, and everybody realizes, oh, we can't actually do that.
Don't be tempted to do a lot of physical stuff. And I know that looks like it's sort of sells.
Don't do any physical stuff.
But yeah, try not to do it. And another thing about Kickstarter is that, one, you're selling the game. So those people who spend money are not going to pay money again when the game is out. And the other thing about having a Kickstarter campaign is the fact that most of the time, making games is expensive. It's very expensive. And most of the time, you can't put the real amounts that a game is going to cost in a Kickstarter campaign because it's just going to be way too high to reach. So you're going to settle for a smaller amount to keep the game running and get it to a point where then you can get investors or publishers, which is our next topics. But keep those in mind when you do Kickstarter. One, you're not going to have extra customers at the end of the line, and two, you most likely aren't going to be able to charge or set your funding goal the full amount of the game needs.
If you're in the United States, there is new legislature around Kickstarter as of 5-6 years ago. So you are selling a product and you are on the hook for it. So if you take the money and run,
I'm glad that is a thing.
If you take the money and run in the US, there is legal recourse. People can come after you, and they will, and they have. So I do not, honestly, I don't recommend Kickstarter unless you are an established company who's been through this before and kind of knows the ropes. I don't recommend it for your first game. I think it's irresponsible. That's just me. But what that takes me to, and the thing that I really want to talk about, there are other avenues for like getting financing to make the game. You can go get loans. You can try to sell to a publisher, but a publisher is going to want a playable version of your game anyway. They're going to want pre-production. They're going to want design documents. They're going to want to know who's going to be making the game. They're going to want a pitch deck. They're going to want a lot of stuff that frankly, you're probably not ready for. Like, let's just be honest. So here's my actual advice. This is what if you want to get into video games, if you want to make a go of this, if you really want to make money doing this, my legitimate advice is approach making video games as if it's a video game. If you load into a video game, let's say you're loading into it. If you load into an RPG, you're not loading in at level 20. You're not loading in with this established business and with all this money and a $1 million game and whatever. You're loading in at level 1. And level 1 in video games is make the game first and make a small game. Test your abilities, see what you can do. Make a tiny little platformer and put it on itch and see how it does. And then make another one and then make a bigger one. If it was 3 levels, make your next game 5 or 10 levels. Level up slowly until you've got the experience that you can finally say, okay, I know what I'm doing. I'm comfortable with this. Let's make this a real business. And then you go and you use the proceeds that you've gotten from selling your small games, and you use that money to found an actual company, and you get a lawyer, and you put everything together, and you copyright your brand and whatever you want to do, and you take one of those games and you put it on Steam, and now you can make some maybe real money, and then continue on Steam. Make slightly bigger games, and then maybe you're at a point where I kind of need to hire somebody. I have this slightly bigger idea, but I might need an artist, or I might need an animator, or I might need something. Now you're at the next step, which is it's not just you anymore. Now you're hiring people, and that's a whole other legal tax process, especially if you're in the United States. You can't just find somebody on Fiverr and hand them $5 and say, hey, I need an art asset. You can do it. It might get you into some trouble because you need to make sure you have the legal ability to use that. And there's nothing stopping that person from going into the asset store and just grabbing something that they don't own and then selling it to you for $5. And the next thing you know, you're using a stolen asset.
Yeah.
So you need to put together contracts, which, hey, you already have a lawyer if you put your business together, right? Your lawyer can help you put together a contract for hiring a person, an artist or whatever, and you guys can work out between the two of you who owns what. Maybe your artist gets to own the IP of what she's designing. Maybe you own the intellectual property and you want to license it back to them if they want to do fan art, which is how we did it. So, okay, you've got your artist, right? Now you can make a slightly bigger game. Let them handle the art and keep going from there. Hire another person, hire your accountant. Now you're getting big enough that you need somebody to handle the money. What I'm trying to get at really is don't try to start big and then fumble through it and fall a lot and end up in what often happens, development hell. Like if you look at some really successful indie games, yeah. So one of the things I watched recently about Cuphead, right? Really successful indie game, has done really well for itself. And if you ask those developers, they will tell you they did everything wrong. Everything. Did it work out for them in the end? Yeah, because they found a publisher who was willing to keep throwing money at them. And that's great, but that does not happen very often. And if you look at the way that they did it, they were in development hell for a long time. And they did exactly what we did. They went through pre-production during production, and then ended up having to like redo a whole bunch of stuff. They also took on this crazy task of hand animating a whole video game, like classic like 1930s hand-drawn animations.
It's quite crazy.
And they were animating on ones too.
Yeah.
It's crazy.
Yeah, it was on.
And yeah, it worked. But I don't think they've actually made anything since, have they?
I don't know. I don't actually know.
And that's kind of the thing that I really want to talk about is like, can you get lucky, make a big game, make a ton of money? Honestly, yes. It has happened. Will it happen to you? Who knows? It's 1 in a million, right? But if you start small and build slowly over time, you're establishing a steady infrastructure that you can fall back on if something happens. So let's say you put out a game and it doesn't do as well. You have the business supporting you to keep moving forward. Whereas if you grow too quickly and in a very unsustainable way, you might hit a point where all of the processes that you've been using aren't scalable and they don't work towards whatever the next project is that you want to do. And next thing you know, you have to let people go. and you have to restructure your business. And
unfortunately,
there's
we
two
know
parallels.
people that happened too. I mean, we can't name obviously what studio it was, but it was a game that came out and the studio immediately dissolved because they tried to scale up too quickly, and then the whole business fell apart because it couldn't support itself.
They tried to go get a like physical studio space, and suddenly they had rent that they couldn't afford, and nobody wanted to give them money for publishing, and they ended up going under. And honestly, that is the reason that we scaled up too quickly, is literally the go-to excuse for every single video game studio right now that's laying people off.
Yeah, that's a good point.
Those thousands of people who've been laid off over the last year and a half is because, we scaled up too quickly during COVID and it wasn't sustainable.
Why did they scale up too quickly?
Small.
Is it because suddenly workers didn't need to have a space to work in because of COVID?
No. It's because COVID meant that people were staying at home playing video games. Mm-hmm. So video game sales skyrocketed.
Right, yeah.
And they saw that as indicative of a long-term trend rather than the fad that it was. Mm-hmm. And they've restructured their entire business thinking that this growth was going to be long-term. And then they got to the end of last year and went, that's not, it's not sustainable. And now they're restructuring. So it's indicative of Western business specifically working towards the quarterly system and just how do we make profit now instead of how do we make profits in 10 years.
Also,
so it's just indicative of bad business plans.
If you haven't watched our previous episode last week, do check it out when we went over what happened with Embracer Group and the bad decisions that they made. It kind of works very closely with this episode.
Yeah. And the thing that I wanted to point out is like, okay, so you have Embracer Group, honestly, is a great example. Scaled up really fast, bought a ton of businesses that they probably weren't ready for, but they had the money for it, bought a ton of businesses, realized it was way too much, and they've spent the last year consolidating their business and making it more lean because they grew too fast and now they're constricting. If you, and people are losing their jobs. 1,400 people have lost their job in the last year because Embracer Group was not smart about how they grew their business. Now, if you want to look at a business that has been successful, there's a really great example here in Texas. It's a grocery store chain called H-E-B. If you live in Texas, you know it. I don't have to explain it. If you don't live in Texas, H-E-B stands for the name of the guy who founded it. It's Herman Edward Butts. We don't need to go into that. Their slogan is "Here Everything is Better," and it's been like, it is the grocery chain of Texas, right? Everybody who lives in Texas knows about it. They've been around for, I think that we're now at 110 years.
Oof, that is
They have not left Texas.
Really? Wow.
They're like in Mexico a little bit, but they're this tiny company that has grown slowly through the state of Texas over the last 110 years. Whereas if you compare that to, say, Starbucks or McDonald's, where it was, let's put down thousands of stores across the country and then across the world, and then, something happens and now we have to close stores, or we have to retrain staff, or we have to, and it happens all the time of like these companies that grow way too big, way too fast, and then they have to consolidate. Whereas if you look at what H-E-B has done, H-E-B doesn't close down stores. They don't have to. They put in a lot of effort in studying the areas where they have gaps, putting in stores in areas that need them. And they own, I think they're more, because I worked there a long time, back in 2016. In 2016, they had 75% of the market share of grocery stores in Texas.
Oh, wow.
75%.
And the lesson here is to just grow slowly.
Go slow.
Strategically.
Go slow. You be strategic, be slow, be considerate. You don't have to do it all at once. If you want to be a successful business, you have to resist the urge to make a bunch of money. It's not get rich quick. It's be smart about it. Start small and build up. And if you look at your business like it's a video game, it starts to make a lot more sense. We already design games that way.
That's a very good point.
So why wouldn't you design your business that way? You know? So that's my like soapbox for the day.
There are more stuff that we need to talk about with this subject. It's a quite big one, and we are actually going to go a bit more into detail with how to deal with publishing deals, potentially getting loans and all that stuff, because some countries do provide that. But we are going to save that for our extended episode. So if you're interested in supporting us, the podcast, everything that RainyGames does, and SunnySide actually too, please feel free to support us down there in the Patreon link. And you get to watch the extended episode for this one, as well as all of our other podcasts. And thank you if you do even consider that. You can also find all of our socials down below, as well as Discord. We're over there. We read all the messages, so feel free to send us messages. And
we do, yeah.
Do comments below if you're watching it, especially on YouTube.
I was going to say, before we sign off, if you're watching on YouTube, I like to leave like here's the kind of comments I want to see. Yeah. Because I like reading comments. I like seeing what you guys have to say. So if you're watching and you are feeling commenty, I want to know, like, what kind of businesses do you know of that have grown slowly over time that have been super successful? Like, are there businesses that inspire you? Are there any that you like would think that you would look up to? Even if you don't own a business, maybe even just as a gamer, are there any video game companies that you're like, they're doing it right? If I was going to have a video game company, those are the people that I would aspire to. I want to know, like, that's it. I want to know who inspires you guys from like a business art perspective. Comment down below. Tell me.
And we'll see you next week, where we talk about the events and current events and the status of the industry then. So hopefully nothing burns down before then.
We'll see what happens between now and then. Wish us luck.
Thank you for listening to us, and we'll see you in the next episode.
Bye guys.